I'm Pamela from Pamela Ruddy Art, and today I'm going to be painting this river scene up here towards the bridge. This is the first time I've tried filming outdoors whilst I'm painting outdoors, and I'm still fairly new to plein air painting, but hopefully I can come up with some tips for you.
Number 1, have a plan.
Just got off the bus. I'm looking for somewhere to set up.
The challenge I had was that my baby was already napping, and I wanted to set up as soon as possible so I could make the most of his nap. Although I saw lots of interesting views, I struggled to find somewhere shaded to work and wasted a lot of time wandering around. So by the time I walked down to the river, where I knew I'd have the shade for the bridge, the little one had already woken up. Two, choose your subject carefully. The first thing I did was made some thumbnail sketches to help me decide what composition to capture. But I made a classic beginner plein air painting mistake. I had fallen in love with everything, with the sunlight on the distant snowy hills, with the way the stonework and the sort of teal bridge was lit up when it was sunny, the golden browns of the bare trees, the way the river flowed, the puddles in the foreground that reflected the sky and the clouds. And I loved all of it, and I wanted to cram all of it in. Big mistake. Because what happens is you end up not being able to get very much detail at all. It all becomes really fiddly and no focal point. What I should have done was pick a smaller subject, and if I loved those things, I maybe should have created separate pictures or separate paintings, or taken reference photos to use as different paintings back at home. After the initial sketch, the next stage is blocking in large areas of colour. This is the underpainting, and it's kind of builds on the idea of a value sketch where you're just getting in the shapes of the darks and the lights and maybe mid-tones as well. And you'll see that it's not realistic colours that I've put in. I've used red for underneath where the green will be for the grass. It kind of helps the greens pop later, and it adds kind of the shadow and, as Karen Margula says, the dirt under the grass. Although this stage of painting can be quite rough, I really like the graphic look of this stage looking back. I feel it had a lot of energy and drama, and I like the colours that I used for the sky and the river. And I feel I'd lost a bit of that by the end of the painting when I've been trying to put in all the different details just because there was so much going on. The third thing I learned was to bring essentials. This comes in two parts. One is there was things I forgot, like my blending tool, so I ended up using my fingers, which meant that my hands were quite messy. Although I had wipes with me, it was difficult to keep my colours fresh and clean and not accidentally smudge things. Pastels are great for blending, which is brilliant until you're accidentally blending things and finding it difficult to get sharp detail and a nice contrast of colour. The second part of this is not to bring too much. The setup I've used on these first few plein air trips has been too heavy and bulky, and I've been experimenting with different solutions to storing my pastels, different bags to take with me, and I'm really trying to pare down what I take. Part of this is self-inflicted because I'm having to take equipment to film with me as well. But as soon as I've got a solution that works well for me, I'll do a video on that, try and help you think of what you really need, what are the essentials for you to take with you. If you're already a plein air painter, particularly if you work with pastels, I'd love to hear your solution to what you take out with you, and if it's one that you're happy with. Put your tips about plein air painting supplies down in the comments below. Four, changing light. If you're outside for any length of time, particularly in Scotland, you'll notice that the conditions change a lot, sometimes gradually and subtly, and other times, like on a sunny, cloudy day where the sun is sometimes out and sometimes in the cloud, the conditions change a lot, and it's easy to fall into the trap of reworking your scene each time that happens instead of being decisive and picking what it is you want it to look like. Um, this is something I really needed to work on, about remembering the way things looked, and part of it is maybe capturing the information when you first sit down or when you first set up at the location, is making the decisions then and then executing it rather than reacting to what's in front of you as it changes, and then finding that actually over time you're kind of presenting a more bland version because you're kind of painting each bit as it's lit up or looking a certain way, and the whole thing doesn't hang together. You don't end up with those shadows that would have been quite uh, would have set everything off, and make sure that you've got the shadows so that the highlighted areas are more wow. But again, this kind of falls into picking your subject at the beginning. I feel on this piece that everything became a bit of a mishmash rather than, oh, that's what I want to say about it. And that's something that might take me a while to really get. I think it comes with experience. Five, interruptions. Setting up and creating art in public is quite an intimidating thing because you're creating something new. You're worried that when people want to look at it, that they have a certain expectation of it being better than it is, particularly if you're near the beginning and it's really rough. But it hasn't been as bad as I feared. Anybody who's come up to me has been really polite, and most people are just getting on with their day. They're, you're doing something a bit odd in the park. They're not that bothered. Um, I don't let the fear of people speaking to you or looking at your work stop you from going out, because it's not worth it. It's probably not going to be as bad as you think. I was lucky on this occasion. I had an old friend come past with her family, and she was able to take a picture of me that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And a bit of encouragement from her as well about what I was doing, which was great. Interrupters to look out for. I'd keep an eye on Labradors if you're taking your lunch out with you. I was lucky, but you have to watch them carefully that they carry on past your bag rather than sticking their nose right in it. Also, be a bit careful about how you set up your supplies, just in case an overly enthusiastic waggy tail sends all your pastels flying. That would be difficult. 6, challenge. If you're used to working indoors in a controlled, comfortable environment where you can work at your leisure from a still photograph, this is going to take a lot of getting used to. It can be frustrating. I certainly have had to stare down my perfectionism and tell myself this is a study to learn from. It doesn't have to be a great piece of art. It's about the process of observing and learning and practicing. It's such a great way to practice courage, which is good for me. And I'd really recommend that you take your art supplies outside too, even if it's just to your garden or the local park, and give it a go. Challenge is a fun and satisfying way to grow as an artist once you push back against the frustration of not being able to get it quite as detailed as you would at home. If you'd like to join me on this journey of learning more about art inspired by nature, I hope you'll subscribe so you don't miss the next video.